Who's the strongest conference in your eyes, SEC or Big 12? Where we're leading?
The Big 12 has been consistently for years now. I think in this particular year, at least 3+ weeks into it, it looks like it's the SEC. If you just take my top 25 and one that I publish at CBSSports.com every morning, I've got 9 SEC teams in that right now. I only have 6 Big 12 teams. If you want to take the human element out of it, go to KenPom. There's 11 top 50 teams from the SEC. In the Big 12, there's only 9. So however you chop it up, earlier in the season, I might have told you the Big 12 has more legitimate national championship contenders, but the SEC is deeper. Now I think it's the SEC across the board, in part because what we're watching with Auburn, what we're watching with Tennessee, Kentucky under Mark Pope looks legitimate. I think the SEC is the best basketball conference in the country right now.
Yeah, you can't forget about Alabama's win yesterday over number 6 Houston as well, so they're going to move up. But SEC, 4 teams in the top 10, and since we're going against the Big 12, they're 7-2 this season right now against Big 12 teams. So it also proves that in terms of the win column.
Yeah, well, SEC, I take them over the Big 12. They have some teams, they're very top-heavy, but the teams that are in the lower range right here, which we'll talk about in a little bit, like a LSU and a Georgia, they can go on some little bit of a run.
I want to add one thing, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way. It's just sort of a statement about where we're at in college athletics. I don't think it's a coincidence that all of a sudden the SEC is the best men's basketball conference in the country. This coincides with name, image, and likeness. It coincides with transfer waivers. Go look at the transfer portal rankings from last offseason and look at where most of those elite transfers went. A lot of them went to SEC schools, and the reason is because SEC schools, right there with Big 12 schools, are spending in the transfer portal, frankly, more money than anybody else.
Go get the bag. It's not wrong with going to get the bag.
That's exactly what it is. I want to stay in the SEC for a second. Give me maybe a school or two that's catching your eye, maybe surprised you this year so far.
I don't know that I'm surprised by them, but they've certainly been impressive, and that's Auburn. I mean, we watched them just handle a Memphis team that has looked great. It was just this time yesterday, people were talking about, is Memphis a top 10 team, a top 15 team? And Auburn just, smacked them around for 40 minutes. So I think Bruce Pearl, he's done unprecedented things basically everywhere he's ever coached. Took Auburn to its first Final Four, and now is attempting to maybe bring Auburn its first national championship. Obviously, that's a difficult thing to do, to win that 68-team bracket. But again, through 3+ weeks of the season, he clearly looks like he's got a team capable of doing it.
Yeah, for me, like the middling teams, like who aren't at the top, who have a number next to their name, like I said, LSU, they have a good win over Pitt and Kansas State. Georgia, they just beat, a number 22 ranked St. John. So there's some teams in there that could maybe potentially, if things happen right, could have an NC State type of run towards the end of the season if they win their conference tournament and then go off into the tournament itself.
I like Tennessee. I am a huge fan of Zakai Ziegler. We were just chatting about him, but I mean, talk about a point guard who's a great two-way player, plays defense. He's been a defensive player of the year in the SEC. He's also a terrific leader for this team, and what they're doing offensively and their flow and their rhythm is a credit to him and how he runs that team. So I enjoy watching them play, and I feel like later in the season they possibly could be an Elite 8 Final Four team.
All right, so we're all riding on the SEC, but the Big 12, they have some love there too.
Oh, sure. If it's not the best conference in the country, it's the second best, and the gap's not as big as we might have made it sound discussing it here the previous few minutes. In the Big 12, Kansas is ranked number 1 in the country, and they just beat a really talented Duke team last night when their best player, Hunter Dickinson, was ejected for the game for kicking a Duke player in the head. So they're terrific. Iowa State is the one that I think more people need to pay attention to. This is a team that won 29 games last season, finished alone in second in the toughest league in the country, the Big 12, got a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, and there were still people who just don't believe in them for whatever reason. Perhaps it's because, they don't have players that are showing up on NBA mock drafts, and it's not a lot of 5-star this and 5-star that. But they returned the top 4 scorers from a 29-win team out of the Big 12 that got a 2 seed. I don't know why anybody didn't think they would be good again this year, but here they are. The lone loss right now is just a 2-point loss to that Auburn team that's beating everybody else pretty badly. TJ Otzelberger's got a legitimate Final Four contender, and if people didn't know it before Iowa State got to Maui, they should know it now.
Well, you know, if I had to choose from the Big 12, I like Baylor. I was heartbroken for them last week when they lost to Tennessee in that double overtime game. You know, Jeremy Roach, you know, good career at Duke, chose to go to Baylor, probably got the bag like you were saying. But then, you know, Norchad Omier, who's a big guy who has, you know, went, University of Miami, he went to the Final Four. So I feel like they could be a dark horse. Maybe, you know, they could bounce back and, you know, have a strong rest of the season.
Baylor was actually mine as well, Roy, but for the reason that their next game is against UConn. I feel like that would be a very good test to see where they are in the measuring stick. We talked about UConn earlier and that they've dropped 2 games in a row, so they have to weather the storm tonight and then after that. But I'm looking forward to that game and seeing the matchups and then seeing where Baylor has grown in their non-conference games. They've challenged themselves, which I like when teams do in the non-conference. So, okay, if you lose now, just don't lose in March.